ImpactNFT Alliance, Project Art, and also Forecast News. That's where we have the moderator. I will be introducing moderator Justin Solomon. But before that, I would like to tell you a bit about the exhibition. What you're looking at is the collections and all the work by a team of volunteers and partners for over the past 12 months. And we actually I want to recognize that Roy, the executive producer with the hat, and he's also the man on the sound control. Thank you. And then also want to acknowledge Nick Thorpe and his team of Telemedia who has sent out the invitation to many of you who responded. And thank you for being here, both journalists and non-journalists, and it's merging and intersections of technology and art. And so there we have it. Tonight you're going to meet some journalists and you're going to meet some agency folks, and also definitely go say hello to Nick over there and his team. And with that, I want to introduce Justin's. And I know Justin's only over the past 6 months or so, and we work together in a different plane besides the editorial. I see him online with the Zoom calls and different things, and finally we see him again. This is only the third time I have seen him. So interesting in the world of COVID, and now this is the Asia's first hybrid format ImpactNFT exhibitions. And we're proud to say that this is the first, and there's going to be many more to come. So I'm going to hand the mic to Justin, who's so experienced in moderating this, and you'll be doing another show coming up in November for Crypto and Beyond Summit. So make sure everyone find out about it. The nice format, we're going to go through the panel discussions, and there will be some Q&A. But at the end, I invite you to stay because our fourth panelist is going to be in the metaverse, and he'll be interviewed by another colleague of ours from the US, and you'll see how the metaverse actually look. And just to give you a glimpse under the tent, it's got an upgraded version of the Sim City. You actually see yourself in the stadium and watching it in real life. So stay and watch that as well. And of course, we have a lot of time until about 7:50 that the metaverse starts. So right now we have plenty of time, so save your questions and ask a lot of questions, and I know the rest is up to Justin to call out. Sorry, we only have one mic, so it will be a roaming mic, but if you ask questions, please shout from the back so we can all hear you. If not, we'll repeat the question. So here you go. Give a round of applause to Justin.
Thank you, Joe. It's a COVID-friendly mic.
Yeah, there you go.
So thank you for having me and for hosting this. It's an exciting event with some really cool artwork to look around. If you haven't looked around yet, please do look around. I want to first start. Most of us know by now what NFTs are. In Q3, sales of NFTs hit $10.7 billion US dollars. $10.7 billion. It's a lot of money, and it's growing faster and faster and faster. That number goes up every quarter. So NFTs aren't going anywhere anytime soon. The question is, what else can you do with NFTs? And that's what we're here to talk about. NFTs for good and using NFTs for other purposes. So, I wanted to first introduce our panelists and kind of get your thoughts on all of this. So let's first introduce Candice Burn-in, forgive me, a strategist in digital marketing and applications for social development. Jenny Zhang, product manager at Carbon Base. And Stefan Laurent, co-founder and chief marketing officer at Rio DeFi. So thank you for being here. So as Joe said, we want to leave time at the end for everybody to be able to ask plenty of questions in this format, and also you can walk around and you can ask plenty of questions if it's more comfortable that way. But let's just kick things off as we pass this microphone around a little bit. And if you can kind of run through what your organizations are doing and working on to dive into this mission of NFTs for good. Kick things off.
Yeah, so I'm representing the NFT Alliance today. And what we're trying to do is bring together an ecosystem around NFTs where we actually want to start getting people involved to more regulated blockchain space and the NFT space to start developing NFTs into other types of products. I think there's going to be a big world of NFTs. a lot of the time people see an image or a JPEG and they think that you're buying an image or a JPEG, but you're actually not. If you think about it, it's a set of contracts and a set of agreements behind the NFT. And if it were a legal document, you'd have the legal document drawn up by a lawyer and it would lie on a shelf somewhere gathering dust. Whereas an NFT is a living, breathing document that you can take everywhere. It's an asset that can transfer anywhere at any time, and it's easily transferable. So we want to kind of develop the space. We want to start getting even the SDGs involved from a sustainable development perspective. And we also want to start bringing in the climate aspect into NFTs.
Thank you, Justin, for the warm intro. So I'm Jenny from Coinbase. So in this panel, I represent the corporate and corporate service provider end of the world, where we're trying to help companies advance their sustainable initiative by providing them with technology tools, and that can come in any form on the spectrum between how to track and visualize your carbon footprint to these impact NFTs, which are a product of Project Arc. So Project Arc under the Coinbase umbrella. So we're the company behind this lovely exhibit that you see tonight. And yeah, so we're here we'd love to talk to the audience about the corporate sustainability needs. What is the message that you want to communicate to the larger community about the actions that you're taking, the investments that you're making, and how can we help you amplify that message and provide these new messages and new narratives to your stakeholder ecosystem.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stefan Corneliu. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at RealDefine. So we are a blockchain technology company. What does it mean? It means we develop distributed software solutions, or otherwise called blockchain. Our core technology is a digital infrastructure called RealChain. And the idea behind this infrastructure is to provide the means to support digital assets such as cryptocurrencies or NFTs to be transferred in a frictionless manner. And this infrastructure of RealChain is meant to support what we call decentralized applications. Software that basically operates in a distributed manner without any centralized organization at the end of it. And so over the past 2 years, we have been incubating a number of decentralized application projects that are building on our network and that are part of our ecosystem.
Thank you. Sorry for the pass the mic. Jenny, I want to ask you, because you briefly touched on this. With corporations, we've seen over the last 6 months more and more corporations getting involved in the NFT space. I think just a few weeks ago, McDonald's in China launched their first NFT in celebration of an anniversary in mainland. At the same time, corporations need to, from the investor point of view and from the customer point of view, meet these ESG demands that they're facing, these targets. How do the two intersect with one another?
Are achieving impact on the ground. The creative community that is so good at creating messaging and creating buzz in the community, and the corporates that want to enable and empower these impacts. So Impact NFTs is the perfect vehicle that sits at the intersection of all of these circles and topics. So to give you a couple examples of projects that the Project Arc team has worked on. So for example, Lace Chips, which is a PepsiCo brand, has recently launched their first Impact NFT with us. And it's an NFT that encapsulates one of their campaigns called the Smile campaign, where they had
Stefan, does that sort of tread on your space a little bit as well, right? Where it's going to go anyway?
Yeah, I think so. By nature, blockchain networks from the time of Bitcoin have brought with them a number of values that derive from the decentralized nature. And one of these values is transparency, censorship resistance, and immutability. And when it comes to NFTs, the same values apply to these digital assets, whether they are art pieces or collectible. And so when it comes to corporate governance or social impact, what blockchain and NFTs can do is basically change the paradigm under which most of these organizations, whether social enterprises or NGOs, use to operate and interact with corporations or entities that do infrastructure for this type of initiative.
But as this is the journalist in me asking this question, as we're talking about behind it, and we're saying, okay, we can use NFTs for good, but it takes a lot of energy to produce these, doesn't it? And how does that all balance out? Is that something you can do?
NFTs use proof of stake, which is negligible in terms of the carbon it's used. And as we also transition to renewable energy, it's actually going to get even more economical to do these from an energy perspective. So I think as the space develops, everything starts out in a way where it needs development, and that's people are actively working in the space because they know that these are the things that are drawbacks. But I think the leverage that they can do and the transformational ability of NFTs make it so much more worthwhile to develop the space than to kind of ignore it.
And Jenny, you shared a number with me, which I think everybody would be really interested in when we were talking the other day. Is that something you can share about the energy use and comparative to just even shipping traditional artwork?
Right. So as a numbers person, I always like to put things in perspective. So to me, the energy conversation is one of the first things we look into because we want to make sure that we're using the best methodology, most energy efficient methodology in terms of impact per footprint created. Isn't using energy over.
Yeah, maybe if I can touch on this, I think it's important to keep things in perspective. Yes, of course, there is an impact on the environment for, let's say, create and mine Bitcoin. Now, we are talking about the technology that's still in its infancy. Bitcoin was incepted like 12 years ago. We talked about NFTs only for 3 or 4 years. So basically what we're addressing here is the limitations of the technology, which is still very in its early stage. So I think we're going to improve tremendously on the table proof of stake. This type of consensus algorithm is definitely going to constitute a step in the right direction. I think we also need to put in perspective what blockchain technology and NFTs actually are achieving to understand what is the cost that's associated with this carbon footprint. Bitcoin already created a new money system, a new gold system, a new way to transfer value globally almost instantly. If we were to account for the carbon footprint, then when it comes to NFTs and the possibility that they offer to disintermediate the transfer and commercialization of media globally, meaning that you can give the possibility to creators, artists, entrepreneurs to actually be retributed or compensated for the value of their work so much more fairly than they have ever been probably in history. Then again, if we put it in perspective, we realize that the carbon footprint and the potential environmental impact of these NFTs is actually very low.
So you debunked that myth a bit. I'm curious, as you speak to people like the audience here and in the metaverse, are there other myths that you hear about NFTs that you get a lot, or questions that you get that you just think, no, that's just not true? Energy use being one of them. Are there other things that you hear that now's a chance to clear that up and say, you know what, this is actually the truth about it? Sorry, spot question, and I'm going to put you on.
I think the big question I get from people oh, but it's a JPEG, or you're paying for a video, you're paying for a JPEG, I can get it on the internet, I can just download it, why must I pay for it? Why must I pay all this money for it? The concept of an NFT is that actually there's a whole contract behind it, like a copyright contract. It's like owning a piece of music. It's like if you are a music producer, you produce the music, you own the rights to reproduce that music, you own the rights to sell that music. You own the rights for that image, you own the rights for that video, for example. So it actually gives artists ownership over the items that they create, that they can sell and distribute and earn royalties off of something, and you're able to monetize it and you're able to get paid directly for the things that you create. I think what it also is, what people misunderstand is, if you look at where we're going into a more intangible world where we're going to be consuming less physical objects because they produce carbon, right? So people are going to move more towards intangible. Take all these physical objects with you. It costs a lot of money to take all these physical objects to different countries. But digital assets you can go anywhere with. They can come with you anywhere. You can trade them very easily, and you can barter basically with your digital assets. So I think that's what people need to start thinking, is that we're moving to an intangibles world where the cost of carbon is going to make the production of goods very expensive.
If I may add this, let me run a quick survey. Who in the audience thinks that he or she is intangible? Now, I have some bad news for you, is that right now you live in the Middle Ages. This internet you interact with more than 4 or 5 hours a day, you don't own any of it. Years ago, in the Middle Ages, we don't own anything. Whatever work we contribute, whatever art for work we contribute to the internet is not ours. Now, what blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and NFTs is that it's a fad and it's going to disappear as soon as it appears. It's not, because we have the opportunity now with this technology to leave the Middle Ages, to actually own. This is what an NFT is. It's an indexation system in the digital realm that for the first time provide uniqueness and ownership over this unique digital entity. So for the first time, we can access private property in the digital world. Now, would you go back to the Middle Ages if private property was to disappear in the physical world? I doubt it. And the same is going to happen now with NFTs in the internet.
And just to add a perspective perhaps from the creative media, so NFT as a creative media versus what Candice mentioned, is it just a JPEG, is it just a video? So I remember seeing this piece of artwork. Less living animals number, the less the pixels. So if you have very endangered species, you have maybe just 50 pixels, and you can probably make out what this animal is, versus if they were 3,000 left, and you can see a little bit more clearly, right? So think about it from a creative media perspective with impact data. What if there is an NFT work that dynamically captures that population data? So community to realize what is the impact of this particular species conservation work done, right? So it opens so many opportunities and so many new way of communicating messages creatively, from both the creative, the impact side, and also for corporates that are supporting these initiatives. It also gives them a way to visually communicate their efforts versus taking a picture, put it in the ESG report, nobody reads it because it starts at page 152 of your annual report. So it's a win-win-win for all of these communities, and it actually sits on a very relatively low carbon footprint mechanism of creation. So it's very efficient, meaning we leave more of the budget, more of the carbon footprint on the actual impact itself, rather than creating the work and sort of the action.
I'd also like to just touch on the whole data thing with the NFTs. So there's a lot of money being spent in corporates saying, oh, you need to tell stories with data. And there's a lot of people teaching it and making lots of money telling stories with data. But what people don't get is an NFT is going to start telling stories based on data oracles. So when we get to a point where information and the information that we're getting is coming from sensor data, and it's coming from sensor data around the world, and it's coming through satellites, and it's not human generated only data. It's actually going to be data that's atmospheric data. That data would be able to feed from oracles directly into an NFT, and that would tell the story. So the image will start telling the story. You won't have human intervention. It'll come from sensor data.
As you mentioned earlier, Dennis, a little bit about working on regulation and NFTs. I'm curious, and it's probably a question for marketers that might be out here listening. As corporations are looking to get involved in the NFT space, is it something that they should be concerned about? I mean, look, we've seen regulation around the world when it comes to, or the thought of regulation when it comes to cryptocurrency. Where do you see that playing with NFTs right now as it becomes more and more prevalent around the world?
Look, I think it does need to get regulated, but I think if you act transparently, I think the biggest issue when it comes to regulation is people doing things in a non-transparent manner. So if you are transparent about where the money is going from the NFT, if you're very clear on the charities you're supporting, if you're using the NFT for good causes, I don't see why regulation would get involved. Regulation only comes in to protect consumers and social causes and is improving the world that we live in for the general populace. I don't see why regulators would be against it. Regulators are there to protect the public. That's what regulatory bodies do.
Working in a blockchain technology company, I can assure you that legal concerns are a daily routine for us, because by essence, governments and regulators do not like blockchain and cryptocurrencies because they cannot control them. And it's usually very hard to find who is accountable for the activities of a certain organization if this organization has no head. So by essence, blockchain technology related applications have a hard time usually dealing with regulators. When it comes to NFTs, there is a broad array of NFTs, and in the future we're going to see a lot of innovation in the juridical realm regarding NFTs, because some NFTs are just virtual assets in the form of art, for example, and they can be treated as such by the law. Then some NFTs can be programmed into some features that would grant their owner certain financial benefits, like the ability to receive some interest rate or some yield over time, making them a financial product, in which case those NFTs would fall into a different category from the previous one. There's going to be also a lot of legal issues related to IP protection in the realm of NFTs, because when you transfer the NFT of an artwork, not necessarily, but usually, you also transfer the full copyright and the commercial rights over this particular NFT. Now imagine you're an artist and you create a certain IP, and then you issue a collection of NFTs based on this artwork, on this IP, and you transfer to all the owner of the NFTs the commercial rights over the NFT. Now what happens to your IP?
Complicated subject to talk about, so thank you for addressing it. Before we turn questions over to the audience, I just have one more question for all of you. It's hard to believe that we are in Q4 already, and 2022 is right around the corner. As we look ahead to 2022 and the NFT space, where do you see, if you were to look into the crystal ball here, where do you see NFTs going? Is it more of do you see the NFT for good space growing? Is there something else that we're missing that you might see?
Axie Infinity, and they're earning money in the game using their NFT. I think we're going to start being able to see NFTs moving between games, and in one game you'll be able to take them with you. So I think it's going to give more ownership to people, not just from the gaming space. I also think NFTs, we're going to start seeing them be applied in new ways. Like I'm sure Jenny will discuss now, with like potentially disrupting renewable energy certificates and having renewable energy certificates appearing in an NFT format. I think the formats and uses for NFTs, we've only just started opening up, and that's kind of why we're trying to create an ecosystem, like a development ecosystem and alliance,
KPIs of these teams in one place. So I definitely think in the next month, in the crypto world, everything seems to be moving in weeks and months rather than years. We'll be seeing a lot more of corporate involvement in these. And shameless plug, if any of you were sitting here is interested, we're definitely happy to talk to you to explain more of how it works, how it could help you. What I want to also mention is that the NFT world, and specifically the Impact NFT world, also provides this new ecosystem where, as a marketing team, you don't have to understand marketing, right? Like there are turnkey solution firms like us and many others that can do that piece for you. So you still keep doing what you previously could.
I'd like to touch back on that. The example that you just mentioned a moment ago about this game, you may have heard of it, called Axie Infinity. If you haven't heard of it, I suggest you check it out. What happened with this particular game, I think it was started in Vietnam about a year ago. If you're familiar with the world of internet gaming, you know that since the mid-2000s, 2005, there was a new economic model that was enabled by the internet, which is free to play. And for decades, companies would create video games and sell them. That was the goal. And then in the early 2000s, some companies started creating games and they gave them away for free, which didn't seem to make sense. But the goal was to actually onboard as many models has been dominating internet gaming for the past 15 years. Now what NFTs have started doing, especially initiated by this particular game, is since you own these particular digital assets within the game, and you can extract these assets outside of the game and transfer it to another ecosystem or another virtual space, then what is possible and what this game achieves is that it gives the possibility to players to actually improve the features of their virtual assets, whether it's an NFT avatar or NFT character. And by improving the feature of this asset, it improves the value of the asset, which means that this player has the possibility at a later stage to sell this item at a higher price than it bought it for. Which means that by playing the game and improving the feature of this particular NFT asset, the player has made money. And this is the concept of play to earn that has been spurred by this NFT gaming concept. And this is just for NFT games. Now, all gaming companies around the world are looking into this business model because, well, they are worried about being disrupted. And there is a good chance that that happens. But this is just one industry. Remember that the massive paradigm shift that blockchain and NFTs enable is the possibility to own in the virtual space. So I think any industry, whether it's e-commerce or social media platform, we're going to see the way those platforms' economic models fit over to all those needs.
We're going to help diversity in terms of people being able to share their diverse cultures in a way that's never been possible in the past. I mean, you'll see an image like Vincent Mozart's showing here, and it's like African culture in a digitized format. And it can be shared with people anywhere in the world. So people will be able to share their cultures, the way that they've grown up, the things that they've been exposed to that have shaped them. They're going to be able to share that at a global level like never before. Before, media used to be dominated by a few companies that would broadcast to everybody. And you wouldn't get to experience diverse cultures, like an example, Squid Games. You wouldn't get to experience these different cultures in the past. NFTs are going to allow people to experience culture like we've never experienced in human history, I think.
Experience and archive it as well, right? Which is incredible. Yeah, let's start taking questions. Go first.
Actually has the reverse effect. And if you don't share, you don't propagate. In fact, you got to make money from somebody, and you make things untransferable. Is that a risk? Because we live in a digital world where we can transfer things very easily right now. But NFTs are about ownership, not sharing. So is that a possibility?
Well, I think with an NFT, everyone can see your NFT unless you create a closed circuit, right? But everyone can enjoy the art. Everyone can see the NFTs that you own. But at the end of the day, you own them. So you have the right whether they're going to get printed on a t-shirt, whether it's going to get used at an event. That would be your right. And other people can view the NFT. It's the same as a piece of art. So someone might own the Mona Lisa. Other people can look at the Mona Lisa. They can see copies of the Mona Lisa online. They can own prints of the Mona Lisa. But at the end of the day, the Mona Lisa is only owned by one entity.
So it can be transferred. So effectively it's unique to that person. You mentioned in New Zealand, I think, and America, the recognition of IP. I was wondering if you might be able to explain what that means.
So I think actually IP law is going to be an area that's going to get a lot of development in the coming years, because IP is going to be the way that people are going to create monetary value of the future. Already things like patents across countries, I think a lot of the things that we're seeing in the world is because patents are getting made by certain countries, and that means the value is going to lie with those patents and the people who own those patents. I also see the potential for NFTs in terms of being an IP marketplace, where if you have, for example, 3D or powder bed printers in your country, instead of you transporting something, someone creates something in one country, they create an NFT version of what that object is, and it can be printed in another country because it can all be recorded in the NFT, for example. So that's how I kind of see it becoming an IP marketplace, where you would go in the marketplace and see the NFTs. You would purchase the NFT for the rights to reproduce it.
Anybody else have anything to add to it?
It seems there is an assumption underlying your question that in a value system like an economy, there is a need for this value and assets to flow, and this is what gives the strength to this economy or this value system. And I would argue that it's true, but the ability to retain value and not to share assets is also constitutive of a very healthy economy or value system, even in the physical world, because some assets actually derive value by being kept and held, such as art, for example. And I think in both respects, NFTs in the digital realm are much easier to transfer and are much easier to hold at the same time. So I think it's technically an enhancement of what our economy is going to achieve.
One more thing. There was actually an academic paper that came out in August from a gentleman, I think he's in Canada or the US, that was talking about how real objects were being made from a history and a National Geographic-like perspective, where museums were starting to create NFTs, or they were starting to almost create the databases to create NFTs as specimens. So instead of you having to transport a specimen to a museum or to a scientist for that scientist to analyze that specimen, it could be built into a 3D visual NFT with the data embedded into the NFT. And instead of transporting that specimen across borders where it might get damaged or lost or something might happen to it, you can transfer the NFTs. So I think we're going to start seeing NFTs a lot more in the science and history mediums.
Any other questions from anyone? Raise your hands and we'll call on you. Please. No questions. Okay. Any final thoughts from our panel before we wrap it up and go to our take a brief break before our next metaverse panel?
Since you mentioned the concept of metaverse, we often see the concept of NFTs associated with the notion of metaverse. Metaverse is basically the glorified version of the internet. And why are NFTs so important to the emergence of this metaverse? Because until now, the internet, even if it's a great tool for communication, it's still fragmented in the way the infrastructure that supports the internet is built and the way assets are transferred across the internet. But now the disintermediation of how assets are transferred across the internet actually enable those different virtual realms and social media and websites and social media platforms to be connected and to have assets flow through them. And this is why the NFT is going to be instrumental in turning the internet into this metaverse.
I want to share this a story I was listening to about the interview with a famous e-commerce founder. And when he was starting his business, I think in the early e-commerce stages, he interviewed a bunch of physical shop owners, and more than 70% of them said, I don't understand why physical stores need a web page. I don't understand why I should list my product online in a digital form. So I think we're at that stage to NFTs where some people are starting to get it, and the future lies in metaverse and having your intangible value of your company or individual encapsulated in these NFTs. So I think we will see that happen probably sooner than we realize.
I think NFTs are also being used to record history. So I think what I've seen with a lot of companies, you get some companies that have been around for 150 years, and they've got photographs of the past. They've got photographs of when the company first started. They've got specific memories that are getting recorded into an NFT because it's almost like a record. It's date stamped on the blockchain, and it's a way for when all the things start to disappear, when the buildings start to reduce, you've got a record of what happened, and it's a record that can be shared with other people instead of it being something which is in the corporate archive that a few people know about who work for the company. They can actually start sharing the company as almost a cultural thing with people, and governments can also share the past so we don't lose it. So it almost acts as a bridge between the previous or the physical past that we've had, and as we move into the green economy, which is going to completely reshape our world as we know it.
Well, thank you all for joining us and sharing this insightful conversation. Thank you all for being part of it. My shameless plug, as Joe mentioned at the beginning, Forecast News is hosting a Bitcoin and Beyond conference, so please, it is free to register, bitcoinandbeyond.io, coming up on November 10th. So check that out, and thank you again for having us here.
Thank you for the panelists, and thank you for Justin's moderating. So just real quick, we've been talking about NFT, and I want to point out for especially those who came, 17 you ended on those boards on description. And you can see some of them, 4, 5, 6, and I saw one that has 14 of them that cover from eradicating hunger to protecting land, air, and the sea, marine animals, and everything there is. So walk around, and there are also something that's multimedia. So take a look at, there's right here to the left of Justin's, right there, there's a hologram. And this is produced by a performing artist who is a ballet dancer for over 15 years, and she drew her inspiration and made that an NFT. It's a limited edition, but it's one of the only multimedia and also hologram in here. On the back over there, you will see some Chinese calligraphy, and it's the heart of dragon. For those who are old enough to remember, back in the 90s, there was one giant, long documentary for the first time it produced and about covering every province in China. And that documentary, it was Emmy Award-winning, called Heart of Dragon. And the producer is kind enough to donate some unseen footage and actually tied to that NFT, and that's his own calligrapher, and his name is Patrick Liu. So do check it out. And there are other ones. For example, you mentioned 150 year. Well, guess what? SCMP is about history, about documenting the history and the location of Hong Kong. They actually have a group of artists and put together a wonderful, very animated NFT to the left as you walk into the last one on the right on the screen. And that actually, the SCMP, all the NFT fundraised will be going toward the Operation Santa Claus, which cover another 300 or so charities over the years. So this is something not only, that's what NFT is all about. So on the screen, I know you've been sitting for quite a while, so getting a little warm. Do get up, and one of the things that I promised my friend from AAJA is that you're going to see the virtual animals, and you can see some AR shots, and you can see it's a little bit dark, but there's a panda. You can sit in the sofa, and we can actually put a panda right in between up to you. And then there's lioness, and then we also have a wolf. So do check it out. The way to do it is really simple. Download the QR code and the app, and look at the environment, and you will eventually, that animal is going to come up. And that is provided and supported by Chicken Waffle and a partner of Break the Chain, which is all the exhibition is on the right, on my right here on the wall, and that is about breaking the chain of all the endangered animal cells and parts of them or actual animals. So do support, and now you can come all back in circle what Impact NFT is all about. And I really hope you will join. Also, the Impact NFT Alliance is impactnft.org. Check it out, and there will be more things we'll be doing. It's an accord where you sign just like a Paris Accord and committing to using sustainable energy and doing all the things that link to that. Talking about which are the lace chips, this is one of the corporate strategy. I know there's some agency folks here. This is a new narrative, new strategy for your client. They actually, this is working, and the Project Arc team actually work with the agency. And the agency, what can we do in the new ESG world? We'll be talking about the same old thing. There's some improvement. Well, here's something new for you. And take a look at it and talk to folks who are here and from Project Arc. We have, I think there's a team of Carl and Ash, and also all talk to Candace and talk to Jenny. So with that, I'm going to close right here. Go download that and have fun and take a look at. And my apologies that only for the little bit of hot air that's its generating. So please go get the animal and work on that.
I like it. Oh wow, it does make it. I really like it.
Yes, so that version is 7.5.
Yeah, that's why I remember
Okay, just real quick, Roy, hold on. So the Matterware.
Oh really?
Or how many days we order in Australia?
I think that is. Okay, guys. So the Metaverse, we're going to put the Metaverse up. Very interesting, 7-year fight. So it's a bit of break.
Literally just meta, waiting to work upstairs.
Oh, yeah. 3 years. So we're
Great play. I've been here for actually today's my 4-year mark today. I moved here 2 days after our 5-year anniversary, or after our 1 year. On our 1 year anniversary. Our 5-year
business 没有一个很 direct 的关系。
不需要，它是去 represent 一个 company 的 ethos， 一个 company 的 philosophy。比如说你们是这个 financial literacy， 你可以去 you simply right you support organizations that are already doing it. For example， 像有一家香港蛮出名的 NGO 叫 ImpactNFT。Provide financial literacy class for domestic helpers. Because a lot of them suffer from like loan sharks. I mean, they're still just like so a lot of times they get burdened by these things.
所以跟公司的这个 corporate 的 philosophy 或者 mission， 或者说它的希望将来的 sustainable development 怎么样？
没错，因为你们帮公司上市，其实就是 provide financial access, right, to your clients. So it works with in alignment with that philosophy. But your ESG effort doesn't have to serve the exact same purpose as your client. Because your client pays you for your service, right? But the whole point of sustainability and ESG, especially the social part, 是你去帮那些他帮不到自己的 like people in need. 所以你可以用这个方式。那你作为一家上市公司，那你这个 story 出来以后，你的 client 会觉得 okay, like this is your company's philosophy. You're giving better financial education, better financial access to all kinds of people. That's why we trust you as a
所以说
financial
我理解现在听起来这个 more like 这个就说这个 investor relations 的一个 project， 对不对？
就是他是把 marketing 跟 sustainability 的 agenda 放在一起。
对，然后通过 NFT 这些 technology 去 deliver 这个 message。
因为你 NFT 的好处是你有 data transparency， 很多 corporate 他做了很多 sustainability。第一是 nobody sees it and nobody believes it because 大家看不到你的钱 actually 花在哪里。但你的 NFT 它下面是 underlying 是 smart contract， 那 smart contract 里面写了说 OK 50% goes to WWF, 50% goes to the rich. You can't change it uncertainty. So there's much more credibility. 然后 back to 你的 company， 因为 you guys 作为一个 financial advisor, most important company philosophy is trust professionalism. Right? That's why your client picks you. Right? So your marketing, your branding, and your sustainability 就全部都 align 在这些 topics 上。But you actually support 哪些 projects， 或者说你用一个什么样的 art form， 其实有很多。
所以你们过去的 business 的 experience 都是去 advise 这些 corporate 怎么样去打包这个所谓的 ESG 的 concept based on NFT 的这个 technology。
因为我们最终 enable 的事情是说，是三赢的 situation。Company 拿到一个很好的 PR opportunity, marketing story， 然后 NGO 拿到 funding， 然后 artist 也拿到他的 support， 他的 PR experience， 是一个三赢的关系。因为这个钱是 sustainable
他 consult 这些 disco， 对吧？
因为 Big Four 不可以自己卖产品，它只能卖产品。Crypto 现在 Big Four 其实出来之前就是 blockchain 的这种 enterprise 的应用
他们是摸着这个 digital authentication 这一块。
对，然后就比如说一些 like blockchain enabled audit software 这个方面，因为它还是营业务是
它是卖的，
因为它不是 marketing。
还是。那所以说，现在香港多不多公司在讨论这个产品？
对，大家都忘了，尤其是老板，因为通常就是
对，因为他们的出发点
的
很简单。How can ESG NFT make our share price going up?
对啊。
Or how can I, reward my investors? Thinking what kind of, revenue or return on investment?
Because the intangible value is very evident. 之前看到一家公司，simply change their name.